All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Blend Show with me, Reed Dailey. Today is the 31st of January, 2023. And it feels pretty crazy to already be 1 month into the year. There are only 11 left. If you count or remove the sort of last month of the year that is just endless meetings and parties, you only have 10 months left. Get going. All right. We got an exciting show. We're going to talk about news and tech, jump into some media highlights that I'm pretty fired up about, talk about Negronis with Greg and what's coming. We're a little delayed, but we're getting there. Then we're going to talk about a little bit of the content on Daily Blend over the last week and a new newsletter we're launching. Finally, getting back into a more steady rhythm of house music, tech house, DJ sort of sets. So excited to talk about that. Then some personal stuff going in and around L's and W's on sneakers and adventures around the globe. And of course, some new social media handles as we're continuing our experiment of more niche-focused social channels and deliberate social efforts versus, all in one. Before we jump into the show, I want to remind you that we are on Instagram and Twitter at Daily Blend. We are also on YouTube at Daily Blend. That is youtube.com/@dailyblend. We, of course, are on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and so many more. All right, with that said, let's jump into El Show. So, as always, I like to start the show off with some sports news. What's funny to me is I am such a big fan of watching sports that I don't necessarily always turn, like I'm not an avid ESPN or Atlantic kind of go and check out the scores every day. But because of this podcast, I've been a little more deliberate of looking up the scores for my teams. And it's kind of made it a little more fun. I will say on the soccer side, coming off the World Cup, I was just a little bit burned out on EPL. So I haven't been watching as much. Definitely some of the highlights and sort of the social stuff, but I haven't been sitting down and watching as many games. I also think I've just been a little busier on the weekends. And so it just hasn't availed itself, as they will, to the opportunity to watch the games. But regardless of my dedication of sitting in front of a tube, let's talk about the scores. So Man City beat Wolves, so that's pretty big. Pretty. I shouldn't say big, but pretty awesome when we get the W's, but not that surprising. Manchester United beat Reading in the fourth round of the FA Cup. Milwaukee Bucks beat the Pacers 141-131. Wow, what a score! And the Chicago Bulls took an L to Michael Jordan's Hornets. So a couple things that I want to talk about in terms of Milwaukee and Chicago. So as you guys know, I live almost directly between both cities, a little closer to Chicago, a little easier to get into Chicago. I live in the state of Illinois, so you would associate my town with Chicago. However, going to all Milwaukee sporting events is so easy. There's less traffic, better parking. It's just less of a hassle. And I finally broke down and purchased my first Milwaukee Bucks hat. And I am wearing my brand new Milwaukee Brewers hat. I went and got that like dark blue that the Braves made famous in the like mid 2000s, early 2010s. And it's almost black, but it's blue. And I'm pretty fired up about it. Looking forward to finally getting a new Cubbies hat this year. And going to a few games. I went to one Cubs game last year, one Brewers game. Looking forward to catching a few of those. Also likely going to a Bulls game here in the next couple weeks. All right, so let's jump from sports talking about headlines. So all the rage has been about Chat GPT, and I've talked about it on this show. I've started to use it both in terms of content writing as almost like a draft. I've definitely used it for email authoring as drafts, just sort of helps accelerate your writing. And I started to look at all the AI generations for art, and for artists out there who, were building or creating some of this. It's going to be an interesting time to see how artists evolve. If you think about years ago, you had people who had sort of rulers and compasses and whatever that other instrument where you put a pencil on one side and draw a circle. And then you had people get better at Photoshop. And now it's going to be those that can query and kind of drive or articulate things to the AI. I'd seen everyone create their own images and icons on social media probably about a month or 6 weeks ago. And then I was listening to the Random Show with Kevin Ferris and Kevin Rose and Tim Ferriss. And one of Tim's projects is all about art generated largely by creatives, but also AI. And it was really cool to see some of that. So I haven't done a ton of trying to create my own art for this podcast or my other social endeavors, but I plan on doing it. And so what I did is I looked and tried to find, 5 or 6 top providers of that. And I linked that in the show notes at daileyblend.com. All the show notes will be on daileyblend.com. Probably not as much in the actual podcast notes, just a heads up for this week's episode and probably moving forward. The next one I want to talk about is an article that Vox ran about the streaming boom and it's over. And, just at the high level is really just talking about that Netflix competitors are losing billions trying to catch the streaming giants. A couple of them were Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Pluto TV, HBO Max, and Discovery. And I'm less going to comment on the direct kind of like investment versus what Netflix has, and more talk about just where all this talent and money is going to go. And there's only so many shows. I mean, I'm already having fatigue of Marvel and DC movies. I'm just not as interested in those, although the TV shows have been most of them, there's been a couple misses, but most of them have been absolutely fantastic. I'll be very interested to see where these creatives land if you get more people doing, podcasts and audio, if you have other people doing more like live performance, or it's just media. And my hope is that some of the folks that were doing or creating TV shows sort of switch and do hybrid projects that maybe cut across media, audio, reading, print, etc. And we see bringing back more local events and more live events. I know that's aspirational. I don't have a lot of data to prove or kind of walk through that journey. But, hats off to Netflix for continuing, I guess, to, be ahead of the curve. But I will be interested to see what Disney does. They've certainly built their marketing platform, and so is Netflix, actually. And, the M&A world between what's going to go on with Disney and likely HBO Discovery. So it'll be a fun time in 2023 to see all these media companies and how they continue to flood the market with content and expenses to do that, and then what's going to happen with all this content. All right, so a couple just highlights, and I don't want to dive into them too much because I really haven't unpacked them enough to do a proper deep dive, but just sort of headlines that Apple could be building its own search capabilities. Not that surprised after ChatGPT. It seems like they could use their cognitive search through Siri and marry those things together, and they could have a pretty compelling offering. There's also been long rumors that they're building an ad platform, so really trying to go after, Google's. I wouldn't call it stronghold or monopoly, but strong presence in the market. Amazon News, they launched their new prescription services, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then I thought one of the things totally different going from like content and Amazon to sort of a local experience or in-store experience was that there's been some switch up with PacSun, which of all the stories, I just found this one most interesting because I always loved going to those stores as a kid. And I think every teenager, 10, 12 to probably like 15, 18, just loves that store. I don't know if college kids still shop there. But there's been some interesting change up. And you're going to have one team member, Alfred Chang, going down to Fear of God with Jerry Lorenzo. And I'm guessing Jerry's going to be spending more time with Adidas. And then Brie Olson will be appointed to be co-CEO. And I'll be interested to just see how a national brand who has, a national retailer who has a ton of brands that kind of come and go with some level of regularity, and I'm talking about like a 3 to 5 year swing, is able to keep consumers coming back, spending money, and then how does that store experience evolve, right? Am I just coming in to consume retail soft goods, hard goods? Are there experiences? So I'm just interested to see what PacSun does to keep buyers coming back into the doors. All right, so we talked a little bit about about Netflix and Amazon, and let's talk about Peacock. So Peacock has been the network that I'm still trying to figure out what it is. I watch a ton of soccer, international football, but I haven't seen that many shows that I'm like, man, I got to watch this. Until I saw Poker Face with Natasha Lyonne, and she's in the Netflix show that's basically like every day, like a Groundhog Day sort of show. So her character is Charlie Cale. Poker Face is a 10-episode Mystery of the Week series that follows Natasha's character, Charlie, and an extraordinary abilities to determine when someone is lying. So this is from the writer-director of the Knives Out movie, and I'm just looking forward to watching this one. Moving on from there to talk about Negronis with Greg, I am behind. I've carved out some time tonight, so episode 3 should drop tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on how long it takes me to cook my dinner. Jumping into more daily blend content across our platforms, or platform and channels, I suppose is the right way to say that. And we had a fantastic 90s hip-hop set from Adam E. He, I believe, is in either Japan. I think it's Japan. It's all hip-hop, all vinyl, really great set. I would listen to it probably 3 or 4 times over the weekend. It's the first time in a long time that my wife even came down and says, oh, you're not playing house music? Or she says, Unsoons. This was actually something I wanted to listen to. So it's gotten my wife's approval, so go check that out. On Monday, so yesterday, we featured Deeper, and their origins date back to 2014 when they were in Chicago releasing music. There was unfortunately some downside to this band. They had a band member sort of depart and then take his life, but the band sort of rallied behind him, I should say, in his memory. And they've been like really charging and making a ton of music. And as someone who lives in Chicago and loves the grit and grime of the rock vibe and scene of this city, I thought they did a nice job of kind of capturing that sound and that feeling. So go check them out. Obviously on, like I said, linked to the post we did on them. You can find them on, I believe, definitely on Spotify and maybe on SoundCloud. All right, going from, two stories about music that are featuring other artists to featuring the Daily Blend podcast. This is episode 148. I'm getting pretty excited. It's been 148 episodes. Actually, it's probably been closer to like 160 because we've done a bunch of Sunday sessions. But it's mostly like melodic house. I'm sticking with the theme of really focusing on key or in-key mixing. This one was not done with Tractor. I'm having some issues with Tractor and bleeping that's happening with the Beatport streaming. Oh, let me digress. So Beatport streaming, you basically pay $15 a month, and you get access to all of the Beatport library, essentially iTunes for DJs, and then it integrates with Native Instruments Tractor, which is my DJ software. It's fantastic. The downside to that is you can't hit record, but if you do have a little pocket mixer or pocket recorder like I do, I have a Zoom recorder, so I use my second master channel, and I record from that, and I've got a mix. It sounds really great outside of these little bleeps and blurps every like 2 or 3 minutes. That's just sort of annoying. So the folks from both Native Instruments and from Beatport are helping me troubleshoot that. So once that's done, you're probably going to see a few more Sunday sessions. Well, definitely going to see more Sunday sessions, and definitely see a few more live mixes. There's pros and cons to that. I think they're a little smoother at times, but also like sometimes there's just some mess ups and train wrecks, so you got to take the good with the bad. In terms of Friday top 5, last week we featured Jeff Staples and some sneakers at CES. Drink Monday, which is an alcohol-free brand of adult beverages, I guess as you would call that. Then our buddies down in Atlanta that we had on 2 or 3 years ago for Sound Off, Tip Top Cocktails, launched a new ready-to-drink app or drink can. We highlighted some really interesting stuff that ChatGPT wrote for Negronis with Greg posts, and then Nike is suing Bape, and now they're actually suing Lululemon as well. So it was an interesting episode. Go listen, go have a read. From a personal standpoint, I won in paddle last week, 6-2, 7-6 against Midtown. I was pretty fired up about that. I linked to what paddle is, our records, our series, all the instructional information you can ever want. So if you want to learn how to play paddle, which I highly recommend you should, go check it out. From a sneakers, haven't bought anything, didn't really mess around with that over the weekend, but Tiffany is dropping their first Air Force One collaboration that I'm aware of. It's a very dark shoe with the Tiffany green swoosh, Tiffany box, and then some like metal Tiffany, pendant on the back. It's fine. I'm not going to race out to get it. It didn't really like get me that fired up. And then moving on to just adventures in the city. I had the chance to finally go to Girl and the Goat last night. I'm going to do a full restaurant review, but a couple highlights I thought were the one, a carrot and carrot paste mezcal drink, sauteed green beans, and goat liver mousse. More to come on that. And then rounding out things just with social channels. We've got Coffee, Kicks, and Cocktails up and running. That's on Instagram. Daily Blend podcast has its own dedicated Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter account. And then Read Daily Music, which is sort of separate from all the other stuff I'm doing in terms of just life and travel. I finally set up Read Daily Music on Twitter and Instagram. Going to be on YouTube as well. Just don't have any mixes really ready for that or available at this time, but I will soon. And my guess is as soon as I start getting the DJ stuff up from my personal sort of sets that are a little different than Daily Blend podcast, you're probably going to see some more like tech interviews on just lessons learned and kind of interesting tips and tricks on just my main YouTube channel. Outside of that, I think it's a wrap for the show. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the show. Check us out on iTunes. What is it? 2001. Apple Podcast and Spotify. Like the show on Instagram and Twitter. And enjoy the rest of the week. We'll catch you on the Friday Top 5. Thanks for tuning in.